Hi, sixth graders. Hope you're doing fine. Today I will read you a story called Child of an Owl, of the Owl by Lawrence Yep. Casey was just a small child when her mother, Jeannie, died. Since then, Casey has been brought up by her father, Barney. When Barney is hospitalized, Casey goes to stay with her Uncle Phil and his family. Used to a free spirited life with her father, Casey is uncomfortable in Phil's strict household. In turn, Phil's family is unwilling to accept Casey's attitudes, ideas, and behavior. The situation is tense for everyone, so Phil decides to take Casey to San Francisco's Chinatown to live with Papa, her grandmother. On the way, Casey is nervous. She has never met Papa, and she feels alone and out of place in the unfamiliar setting. Phil headed up Sacramento Street, a steep slanting street that just zoomed on and on the top of Nob Hill, where the rich people live and where they had the swanky hotels. Phil turned suddenly into a little dead-end alley wide enough for only one car. On one side was a one-story Chinese school of bricks so old or so dirty that the bricks were practically a purple color. On the other side, as we drove by was a small parking lot with only 6 spaces for cars. Phil stopped a car in the middle of the alley, and I could see the rest of it was filled with apartment houses. Somewhere, someone had a window open and the radio was blaring out, "I Want to Hold Your Hand," by that new group, the Beatles. I couldn't find the place where it was coming from, but I did see someone's diapers and shirts hung in the windows and on the fire escape of one apartment. "Why do they hang their laundry in the windows?" I asked Phil. "That's what people from Hong Kong use for curtains," Phil grumbled. The sidewalk, the sidewalk in front of Papa's house was cracked like someone had taken a sledgehammer to it, and there were iron grates over the lower windows. The steps up to the doorway were old, worn concrete painted red. To the left were the mailboxes, which had Chinese words for the names of or had no labels at all. To the right were the doorbells to all the 9 apartments. Phil picked out the last and rang. He jabbed his thumb down rhythmically. Rhythmically. "Three short, three long, three short." "Why are you doing that?" I asked. "Signaling your Papa," he grumbled. "She never answers, just one buzz like any normal person, or even just 3 bursts. It got to be 9 buzzes in that way, or she doesn't open the door. She says her friends know what she means." So did I. It was Morse code for SOS. The buzz around the door sounded like an angry bee. Phil, the pill opened the door, putting his back against it and fighting against the heavy spring that tried to swing it shut. "Go on, up 3 flights, number 9." I walked into an old, dim hallway and climbed up the wooden steps. As I turned an angle on the stairs, I saw a light burning fierce and bright from a window. When I came to it, I looked at the roof of the Chinese school next door. Someone had thrown some old 45s and a pair of sneakers down there. If I were some kind of kid that felt sorry for herself, I would almost have said that was the way I felt. Like some piece of old ugly junk that was being kicked around on the discard pile while Barney was getting better. I didn't stay by the window long, though, because Phil was coming up the stairs and I didn't want to act like his kids' stories about Papa had scared me. Anybody could be better than Phil and his family, I hoped. I stopped by the number 9 room, afraid to knock. It could not be the right place because I could hear, "I want to hold your hand," coming through the doorway. I scratched my head and checked the numbers on the other doors on the landing. Phil the Pill was still a flight down, huffing and puffing up the steps. With my duffel bag, it wasn't that heavy. Phil was just that much out of shape. "Go on, go on, knock, you little idiot," he called up the stairwell. I shrugged. It wasn't any of my business. I knocked at the door. I heard about 6 bolts and locks being turned. Finally, the door swung open and I saw a tiny, pleasant, round-faced woman smiling at me. Her cheeks were a bright red. Her gray hair was all curly and frizzy around her head, and a pair of rimless, thick glasses perched on her nose. She was round and plump, wearing a sweater even on a hot day like this, a pair of cotton black slacks, and a pair of open-heeled flat slippers. "Papa," I asked. "Hello, hello." She opened up her arms and gave me a big hug, almost crushing me. It was funny, but even though it was like I said, Barney and me never went in much for that sentimental stuff like hugging and kissing. I suddenly found myself holding on to her. Underneath all the soft layers of clothing, I could feel how hard and tough she was. She patted me on the back 3 times and then left me for a moment to turn down her radio. It really was her old white beat-up radio playing rock music. "Hey, how about a hand?" Phil puffed as he finally got to the landing. Papa shuffled out the landing in her slippered feet and made shooing motions. "You can go home now. We can do all right by ourselves." Phil heaved his shoulders up and down in a great sigh and set the bag down. "Now, Mama, go home," she said firmly. "We need time by ourselves." I saw that Phil must have had some fine speech all prepared, probably warning Papa about me and warning me about ingratitude. He was not about to give up such an opportunity to make a speech. "Now, Mama, go on. You're still not too old for a swat across the backside." Phil ran his hand back and forth along the railing. "Really, Mama? You oughtn't. Go on." Papa raised her hand. Phil gulped. The thought of having a former district president of the lawyers spanked by his own mother must have been too much for him. He turned around and started down the steps. He still had to get in the last word, though. "You're mine, your Papa. Your young lady, you hear me?" he shouted over his shoulder. I waited till I heard the door slam. "Do you know what those buzzes stand for?" "Do you?" Her eyes crinkled up. "It stands for SOS. But where did you learn it?" "When I worked for the American lady, her boy had a toy. What do you call it? She made a tapping motion with her finger. Telegraph. Yes, it's a good joke on such a learned man, no? Her round red face split into a wide grin, and then she began to giggle, and when she put her hand over her mouth, the giggle turned into a laugh. I don't think that I had laughed in all that time since Barney's accident a month ago. It was like all the laughter I hadn't been able to use came bubbling up out of some hidden well, burst out of the locks, and just came up. Both of us found ourselves slumping on the landing, leaning our heads against the banister and laughing. Finally, Papa tilted up her glasses and wiped her eyes. Philip always did have too much dignity for one person. Ah! She leaned back against the railing on the landing before the stairwell, twisting her head to look at me. You'll go far, she nodded. Yes, you will. Your eyebrows are beautifully curved like silkworms. That means you'll be clever. And your ears are small and close to your head and shaped a certain way. That means you're adventurous and win much honor. Really? She nodded solemnly. Didn't you know? The face is the map of the soul. Then she leaned forward and raised her glasses and pointed to the corners of her eyes where there were two small hollows, just shadows, really. You see those marks under my eyes? Yes, I added after a moment, Papa. Those marks, they mean I have a temper. Oh, I wonder what was to happen next. She set her glasses back on her nose. But I will make a deal with you. I can keep my temper under control if you can do the same with your love of adventure and intelligence. You see, people, including me, don't always understand the love of adventure and intelligence. Sometimes we mistake them for troublemaking. I'll try, I grinned. I went and got my bag then and brought it inside Papa's place and looked around, trying to figure out where I'd put it. Her place wasn't more than 10 by 15 feet, and it was crowded with her stuff. Her bed was pushed lengthwise against the wall next to the doorway leading out to the landing. To the right of the door was another doorway leading to the small little cubicle of a kitchen, and next to that door was her bureau. The wall opposite to the bed had her one window leading out to the fire escape and giving a view of the alley, which was so narrow that it looked like we could have shaken hands with the people in the apartment house across from us. Beneath the window was a stack of newspapers for wrapping up the garbage. Next to the window was a table with a bright red and orange flowered tablecloth. Papa pulled aside her chair and her three-legged stool and told me to put my bag under the table. A metal cabinet and stacks of boxes covered the rest of the wall, and the next one had hooks from which coats and other stuff in plastic bags hung. In the right corner of the old bureau were some statues and an old teacup with some dirt in it and a half-burnt incense stick stuck into it. The rest of the top, though, was covered with old photos in little cardboard covers. They filled the bureau top and the mirror, too, being stuck into corners of the mirror or actually taped onto the surface. Next to the photos were the statues. One was about 8 inches high, in white porcelain, of a pretty lady holding a flower and with the most patient, peaceful expression on her face. To her left was a statue of a man with a giant size bald head. And then there were 8 little statues, each only about 2 inches high. Who are they? I asked. Statues of some holy people, Papa said reluctantly. There was something familiar about the last statue on Papa's bureau. It was of a fat, balding god with large ears who had little children crawling over his lap and climbing up his shoulders. Hey, I said, is that the happy god? Papa looked puzzled. He's not the god of happiness, but they call him the happy god. See? I pulled Barney's little plastic charm out of my pocket and pointed to the letters on the back. Papa didn't even try to read the lettering. Maybe Barney had already shown it to her long ago. He's not the god of happiness. He just looks happy. He's the Buddha who will come in the future. He's smiling because everyone will be saved by that time and he can take a vacation. The children are holy people who become like children again. What about the others, Papa? I don't have the words to explain, Papa said curtly, like the whole thing was embarrassing her. I sat down by the table on the stool, which was painted white with red flowers. Sure you do. I think your English is better than mine. You don't want to know any of that stuff. With her index finger, Papa rubbed hard against some spot on the tablecloth. That stuff's only for old people. If I tell you any more, you'll laugh at it like all other young people do. There was bitter hurt and angry in her voice. I should have left her alone, I guess, but we have been getting close to one another and suddenly I'd found this door between us, a door that wouldn't open. I wasn't so much curious now as I was desperate. I didn't want Papa shutting me out like that. I won't laugh, Papa. Honest. That stuff's only for old people who are too stupid to learn American ways, she insisted stubbornly. Well, maybe I'm stupid too. No, Papa pressed her lips together tightly, and I saw that no matter how much I pestered her, I wasn't going to get her to tell me any more about the statues on her bureau. We'd been getting along so great before that I was sorry I'd ever started asking questions. We both sat, each in our own thoughts, until almost apologetically, Papa picked up a deck of cards from the table. Do you play cards? Some, I said. Draw poker. 5 card stud. Things like that. Papa shuffled the cards expertly. Poker is for old men who like to sit and think too much. Now I know a game that's for the young and quick. What's that? Slapjack, she explained, that each of us took half of a deck and stacked it in front without looking at it. Then we would take turns taking the top card off and putting it down in the middle. Whenever a jack appeared, the first one to put her hand over the pile of cards got it. She then mixed the new cards with all the cards she still had in front of her. The first one to get all the cards won the game. It would sound like the advantage was with the person who was putting out the card at the time, but she was supposed to turn up the card away from her so she shouldn't see it before the other player. Papa had played a lot of card games since she lived by herself, so she seemed to know when the jacks were going to come up. For a while, all you could hear was the slap, slap, slapping of cards and sometimes our hands smacking one another trying to get the pile. And sometimes I had more cards and sometimes Papa would. Eventually, though, she beat me. She shuffled the deck again. "You're a pretty good player," she grudged. "Not as good as you, though." Papa shuffled the cards, tapping them against the table so the cards in the pack were all even. We used to play all the time. Your mother, Phil, everyone. We'd hold big contests and make plenty of noise. Only when Phil got older, he only wanted to play the games fancy Americans played like. What's that word for a road that goes over water? A bridge. Phil wanted to play bridge. "Yes, Papa, put the deck on the table." I wandered over to the bed. The radio was in a little cabinet built into the headboard of the bed. I lay down on the bed and looked at the radio dial. "Do you like rock music, Papa?" "It's fun to listen to," Papa said. "And besides, Chinese Hour is on that station every night." Chinese Hour? An hour of news and songs all in Chinese. Papa slipped the cards back carefully into their box. They used to have some better shows on that station, like mystery shows. I bet I could find some. I started to reach for the dial. "Don't lose that station." Papa seemed afraid suddenly. "Don't worry, Papa. I'll be able to get your station back for you." It was playing Monster Mash right then. I twisted the dial to the right, and the voices' snatches of songs slid past, and then I turned the dial back to her station, where Monster Mash was still playing. "See? As long as you could get it back," Papa said reluctantly. I fiddled with the dial some more until I got hold of Gunsmoke. I'd gone off the air 3 years ago, but some station was playing reruns. Papa liked that, especially the deep voice of the marshal. It was good to sit there in the darkening little room, listening to Marshall Dillon inside your head and picturing him as big and tall and striding down the dusty streets of Dodge City. And I got us some other programs too, shows that Papa had never been able to listen to before. Don't get the idea that Papa was stupid. She didn't understand American machines that well. She lived with them in a kind of truce where she never asked much of them if they wouldn't ask much of her. "It's getting near 8, Papa said anxiously. It was only when I got the station back for her that she began to relax. I was always so worried that I would not be able to get back the station. I never tried to listen to others. Look what I missed." "But you have me now, Papa," I said. "Yes." Papa smiled briefly, straightening in her hair. "I guess I do." And this is the story. So I hope you like it. Bye.